Hey everybody, it's me again. I'm finally going to get around to the topic that I've been wanting to write about for a long time. I wrote several of these up way back in the spring, and they just never did quite work out. It's a complicated issue. It's all about how great America is, and this time about the tariffs. And so what I finally decided to do was, I said, well, why don't I just use that same Melanie's fourth grade classroom analogy like I did in the last video to try to explain the tariffs. Now, if you haven't watched that one on how the federal government budgeting really works, that was my last one, I'll wait. Really? You can do that? I'm being told that it's possible to pause this video and for you to go watch the other one and then come back to this later. I had no idea. Well, anyway, you don't need to really watch that one. Let me catch you up real quick. My wife, Melanie, taught the fourth grade here in the great state of Texas for 31 years. Now, in that classroom, she invented something she called Harvey Bucks to create, oh, I got one here from my last video, to create an incentive for good behavior and good grades in her classroom. All right, so here's how I want to use that to transfer over to my tariff discussion. Let's say that she inadvertently created a mini commercial revolution in her classroom. We got students making things to sell to each other, and for example, paper footballs. If you've never had one of these, boy, I'm going to tell you right now. Look at here. Woo! All right, so paper footballs. Let's say some kids in her class start making these things, and they decorate them up all pretty and so forth, and they sell them to each other for 10 Harvey Bucks each. Now, other kids in the classroom make whatever they're going to make, and they have a little economy going on, right? But wait, suddenly, some of the other teachers start copying Melanie, and they start issuing their own bucks in their classrooms. Now, let's call them all Harvey Bucks, so we ain't got to get into exchange rates and so forth in this example. And let's further say that other kids start making and buying and selling stuff too, and to other classrooms. Now we got us some international trade. And let's say there's a kid in Miss Lander's class, let's call him Beaver, making paper footballs and selling them for only 7 Harvey Bucks. Now remember, back in Melanie's classroom, they sell for 10. Well, if nothing else happens in the paper football industry in Melanie's class, well, it's outcompeted. Either they adapt, they move on to a new product, or they quit altogether. It's bad for them, but it's good for the folks who want to buy paper footballs, right? Things got cheaper for consumers in every classroom, including Melanie's. But now let's say that Melanie is concerned about the impact on the paper football industry in her class, and she believes that industry needs to be rescued. So she starts demanding a tax from Beaver. A tax of 4 Harvey Bucks per football sold in her classroom. You can sell things in my classroom if you want to, but there's going to be a tariff. There's a new tariff in town, right? It's going to be 4 per football. So, it's going to get a little complicated here. I apologize for that. I'm going to try to simplify a bit at the end, but all right. This does not necessarily raise the price of imported paper footballs to 11, or the tariff of 4 plus the price of 7. And even if it did, that don't necessarily mean that the consumers in Melanie's class are the ones who end up covering the whole cost of the tariff, all right? That's what I see a lot of people saying on the intranet. They keep saying, well, a tariff is just a tax on domestic citizens. That's not exactly right. I mean, I am going to conclude that the tariffs are a bad idea, but the story is a bit more nuanced, I looked up that word, than that. All right, let's go back to Melanie's classroom. The question becomes, how much can the external seller afford to absorb of the tariff cost? Maybe their original 7 Harvey Buck price, maybe they were making quite a bit of profit on that. Maybe they could afford to cut how much they were going to sell it for to 6. So that when you got the 6 plus the 4 Harvey Buck tariff, they're actually selling at 10, just like the domestic football producers in Melanie's classroom. Note, first of all, this means that Melanie has not necessarily saved her industry. Or maybe they can cut the price even more. Maybe Beaver can cut his price down to 5 So that 5 plus the tariffs, just 9, still outcompeting the domestic producers of paper footballs in Melanie's class. Because if Beaver is willing to give up some of his profit, then he can cut the price even after the tariff that he sells in Mrs. Harvey's classroom. And notice here, Beaver is the one paying the tax. It's not just the students in Melanie's class, right? They pay part of it, the producer pays part of it. Now again, it's getting messy. But this is what they call tariff incidence, all right? Tariff incidence, I can point out some places you can look online. Tariff incidence says how much of the tariff is being paid by the consumer versus how much is being paid by the producer. And it's not 100% consumer and 0% producer and so forth, right? So it does definitely raise costs. In fact, that was the point in the first place, right? That's what Ms. Harvey is trying to do. And it's inflationary. And there's no guarantee that actually the protected industry will be protected. Worse still, this is what I want to get to. Worse still, there's a better way to do this. What if Miss Harvey had said to herself, rather than raise the cost for Beaver Cleaver, who's selling things into her classroom, why don't I lower the cost for my domestic producers by subsidizing them? Subsidies for domestic industries are always better than tariffs on foreign ones because they achieve the same goal. It creates a cost advantage for the home folks while not punishing the consumers with inflation. She could have been paying her domestic football, paper football makers $4 per football, allowing them to lower their selling price from 10 to 6 and thereby undercutting Beaver Cleaver from Mrs. Landry's class, who was selling at 7. And recall from the last video, Miss Harvey can absolutely afford to do this, and she can make Harvey bucks back at the copier. There's no limit on Harvey bucks. She can subsidize all she wants. Now, let me slow down a bit here. I am not saying that the U.S. should be trying to revitalize particular industries via subsidies or tariffs. In fact, we're far better off with a job program. I got other videos on that, all right? That's the way I would go. But of all the choices available to us in terms of trying to boost a domestic industry, tariffs are pretty much the worst one. I mean, if there's a good argument for protecting a particular domestic industry, subsidize it. Directly support it. Help it and help consumers by lowering rather than raising costs. And subsidies don't trigger retaliation like tariffs do. Nor do they discourage folks from trading with us because they don't end up contributing to a reputation for unreliability and unpredictability. Right now, people don't want to deal with us because they're not sure what the rules are going to be tomorrow. And as you already know, we don't need tariff revenue to pay for government deficits. I explained that in the last video. Long story short, tariffs, what are they good for? Absolutely nothing. Say it again. Thank you.